Hello, welcome once again to another episode of Open Talk. In today's episode, our guest is Enfal Fikri, founder of Silver Tea Leaf Consultancy. She's a tea expert and consultant, and we will talk to her about her expertise. Welcome to our program, Enfal.
Thank you very much.
Enfal, to start with, could you tell me about Silver Tea Leaf and why did you come up with this idea?
Well, basically, Silver Tea Leaf, the idea was since 2013, and it all started with the curiosity of what makes the perfect cup of tea. And that question or that curiosity drove me to learn a lot about tea, to educate myself, and to basically establish Silver Tea Leaf, because not only we lacked a lot of knowledge in terms of how we prepare and serve tea, but also there were a lot to add in Bahrain and as well in the Middle East. So that was my motivation to start Silver Tea Leaf from the start.
Okay, and where do you see it going from the steps that you have taken?
Well, at the moment, because when we started it the idea was in 2013. However, when we officially launched it, it was back in December 2014. And since that time, we've conducted a lot of training and consultancy services to one of the big players here in Bahrain, and we also participated in a few events in Dubai. And last December, I was a judge in the Tea Master Cup in Dubai as part of the Coffee and Tea Festival.
Okay.
That happens every year there, obviously in Dubai. And it was an interesting experience to see that a lot of the participants over there, there were a lot of innovation to be given in that competition. A lot of the participants that came from different restaurants and hotels, some of them had some practices brought from home, and some of them were just used the utensils and the teas in front of them to come with a very innovative beverage using tea.
Nice. And can you tell me, how do you find the habit of Bahrainis when it comes to tea?
Well, when we talk about Bahrain and in terms of the habits about tea, we actually ran a survey where we surveyed more than 100 people in Bahrain, asking them about their norms and the preference of what they would like to have in their teas.
Okay.
Like, we've noticed that most of the people like to have their tea in the morning, and like that ranked number one. And number two was people like to have their teas in the afternoon, and the rest were between having their teas at work, or when they're out with their friends, or in the gatherings, or specific times of the day where they want to just de-stress from all the stresses around them in the world. So that's one thing. Another thing, what we ask them is their preference of what they like to add with their tea. Okay. And obviously, many people voted milk as number one, and then they added sugar. I mean, they voted number two for sugar, and there are other people who like to add saffron, roses, rose petals, rose water, and some spices into their tea. So when we look into the tea drinking habits here in Bahrain, we realize that it's mostly like every family have their own different recipes of how they would prepare their tea. Like, some would prefer to have it with milk and sugar, while others, like for example, would not add any of these.
So would you say it's more that the black tea or the red tea is more popular than the white teas and green teas in Bahrain?
Well, if I would ask the question 10 years ago, if I would ask, like, let's say my mother, how many kinds of tea do you know? She would tell me maybe she would tell me black tea, which is what we know as red tea, and maybe green tea. But today, no, a lot of people have more understanding about teas. Like for example, people are aware that there are certain kinds that we call them white teas, where there are other kinds which are completely different than white teas. We call them tisanes or herbal teas, like chamomile and stuff like that. But obviously, we don't call them tea, we call them herbal infusion. That's something what our role at Silver Tea Leaf, we emphasize on educating people, where there are some beverages, we call them tea, that contains caffeine, while others are herbal infusions that do not contain caffeine. So yeah, I mean, and there are people who, for example, I get asked a lot, oh, what about fruit tea? What about tea blends? So today, when I would ask this question, a lot of people are going to be giving me different answers. So it's not like the past where people only knew one or two kinds of tea or herbal infusions, but now today people are more educated in tea and are eager to learn more about tea.
They are indeed.
Yes.
Because I believe, I personally, for example, I like tea so much, but
Yeah.
I personally prefer the green tea and white tea.
Okay.
So it's nice to have. It's actually calming. It's relaxing, and everyone wants something that's like that. So can you tell me? I believe you have a new brand called Tips of Tea.
Yes.
Could you
yes.
tell me more about that?
So basically, Tips of Tea was launched by Silver Tea Leaf. So Silver Tea Leaf is still the mother company for Tips of Tea. Tips of Tea is a tea brand that we launched back in February, and we're so proud that this brand managed to participate in the Gulf Food, which is the largest food expo in the world. We participated, or we basically displayed some of our products there last February. And with Tips of Tea, we're taking tea, or we're introducing a different angle with tea. We're introducing a concept of single origin, single estate teas, where we directly source our teas from the farm and from certain countries and from certain terroirs, or from certain, I would say, locations. And not only that, with this tea brand, we are also making sure to take care of each and every step of the way. Like, for example, we are very selective with our farms. We would only select farms that are either starting tea farms or family-run tea farms that purely depend on tea for their living.
Nice.
And that's something where it's like using the term of a fair trade, but we're doing it on our own, basically, with this new tea brand. So we're basically having different kinds of, we have white teas, we have green teas, we have some oolong teas and some black teas. And we also, some of the teas, we use them to do handmade tea blends from Bahrain.
Nice. And what would be the most popular tea that you have so far?
So far, when we made people taste the teas, at the moment, a lot of the people, I mean, in terms of the single teas that are not blends, a lot of people, I've noticed that they love the oolong teas that we have. We call it the honey orchid, where so far it has been a top seller with our tea ranges. And we will also be introducing a new tea blends collections for Ramadan.
And what would those blends be, if you could give us?
Okay, so we have 3 blends. The first blend, we called it Love in Damascus, where we blend a certain kind of black tea with rose and saffron, and it's also a reflection of how Bahrainis like to drink the tea. This is one thing. The other, this is one blend, I mean. The other blend, we call it Masala La. It sounds funny, but the whole purpose of that blend is we managed to have a tea, a black tea mixed with certain herbs, and we intentionally made that blend for people who would like to have a masala tea, but would like to, for example, would prefer to have it without milk or without sugar. So this blend will be just the right amount of, it's just going to be very balanced for them to drink. And we have a third flavored green tea, which we flavored the green tea from China. We flavored it with mango. And so far, when we've been testing this tea, a lot of people loved it. And it was, at the beginning, people were like, oh, what is mango with the green tea? So, but when they tasted that, it actually went perfectly together.
I'm sure it does.
Yes.
So can you tell me about the potential of sommeliers?
Okay, so basically, in terms of my background and my education, a tea sommelier, especially in Bahrain and in the Middle East, has a huge potential. And a sommelier is usually the person that would run, for a tea sommelier basically would run a tea house or a tea lounge, where that person is going to be responsible of how these teas are imported, the sourcing of the teas and the purchase decisions, how these teas are stored, how they are prepared and served and presented to the customers that actually visit that tea lounge or that tea house. So basically that tea sommelier has a huge responsibility to also educate the customers of certain elements about the tea. For example, the tea sommelier needs to also know the people who are dining in that occasion. For example, if that sommelier saw that there is an old person,
Okay.
but attending that tea lounge in the evening. So then it's the responsibility of the tea sommelier to alert that person that maybe perhaps that person should choose something that is caffeine free or a herbal infusion rather than having like let's say a strong black tea in the evening. So because that's going to affect them, and also if they had kids, they need to make sure to serve the appropriate kinds of tea for them. So this is actually the role of the sommelier. They are there to educate the people and to make sure that their purchase decisions are done in the right manner.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I may ask you, you said earlier you saw a lot of people in Bahrain when you did the survey. A lot of people have their teas in the morning. What would you recommend what kind of tea would you recommend to have in the morning?
Well, in the morning we would usually recommend a person to have a strong tea, a strong black tea. We would definitely, for example, push the Assam black tea, because the Assam is known to be a very strong tea, and it's good to give you that boost and energy in the morning.
Okay.
So that's actually an ideal choice for people to have a black tea in the morning. For example, we would avoid people to drink any, let's say, herbal infusions in the morning, like chamomile, because chamomile is known to be good for the evenings or before going to bed, because it helps you calm down and prepares you to sleep.
Yeah, that's true. So so what would you recommend for the afternoon tea?
Okay, the afternoon, depending on the person, on what they would like to have in the afternoon. Like, for example, if the afternoon is after a quite heavy lunch, I would definitely advise people to have green teas, because it could help them in digestion. While if they just want to have a nice cup of tea with some certain desserts, they can still go with a lighter black tea if they wish. Like, for example, Darjeeling is like the ideal tea selection that could go with many desserts, but depending on how you'd pair each tea with desserts. But yeah, Darjeeling can be as well a good option.
That's nice. So could you tell me about your the events that you have participated in so far?
Well, basically the events that we've participated, we did a lot of events with different entities in Bahrain. Like, we've participated in the chocolate and coffee exhibition back in 2016, where it was the first time we introduced the concept of tea and chocolate pairing. We used bare chocolate to do the pairing, and we've seen a lot of people there. They had an astonishing expression on their face when they actually noticed that the chocolate changed before and after having the tea. So that was actually quite a big hit for us. We've also had a private session done in Ministry of Coffee. It's located in Sanad as well, using bare chocolate, where we allowed people to do a blindfold tasting, and then we allowed them to do a tea and chocolate pairing, and it was as well an experience that many people, it added a lot of value into them. Like, I had one participant who started to appreciate food more just because of that exercise, because that even though we practice that on tea, but this knowledge that is gained, you would also be able to apply it on different food items.
Of course, you could appreciate it more when you know the value, because you'll taste it. It's not just your eyesight. So, what are your upcoming events?
So at the moment we do have an event which is going to be on 5th of May in collaboration with the Cooking Studio, where this time we're going to be having a more intense workshop for those who are like more into those who have a cafe or a restaurant in Bahrain, those who have a huge impact or a huge influence in food in Bahrain, and also for those who are very passionate about food. They just like to eat and taste. So we do have a workshop with the Cooking Studio. It's called the Basics of Tea Tasting and Pairing, where the participants are going to be learning certain aspects about how to taste and how to describe the taste of everything they would conduct. Like, we would be giving them, we would guide them, we'd give them like terminologies and charts on how to do that, as well as this time as well, for the first time, we will be allowing the participants, based on the teas that they would taste, they would also pair it with certain kinds of desserts according to the taste, and we would be able to teach them the elements of how they can pair tea with certain kinds of food and desserts, where they can use this knowledge to apply it in, let's say, in their restaurants and in their everyday lives, which is going to happen. This event's going to happen on, as I said, on 5th of May, from 4:30 to 6:30, and it's going to be in Riyadat Mall.
That's really nice. It's
Yes.
very interesting.
Yes.
I'm sure everyone that wants to learn how to implement this
Yes.
would love to be in your workshop.
Yes.
Well, any last words that you would like to tell our viewers out there?
Well, what I want to say is that as a consumer, whenever you're having tea, always make sure to know what you're having. Always ask for the components that are in your pot of tea. Like, make sure that when you're going out there, you need to be able to understand what your body can accommodate. Because, for example, there are people who cannot, for example, tolerate caffeine, or so, and there are other people who would be drinking a whole pot of tea and they would be able to sleep in the night. So it's very important for every person to understand their body and to make the right decision when they're purchasing their teas.
Of course. Well, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Anfal.
Thank you.
Wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
Once again, our guest today was Anfal Fikri, founder of Silver Tea Leaf Consultancy. Thank you for watching Open Talk and have a good evening.